video, I'm going to tell you exactly how to get started on writing your personal statement and refine it before you send it off to your universities. This is the ultimate personal statement guide for the year 2025 to 2026 onwards. If you're new here, I'm Navya. I currently study psychology at the University of Warwick, and although I did my personal statement back in 2024, I did some research and checked out the new personal statement format, and I've realized that it isn't that different. So this video is a compilation of the questions from the new format, what you should write in each question, and a bunch of tips that have worked in the past and continue to work even in the new format. Now, yes, the format has changed, but the fundamental writing is still the same. In fact, UCAS did this to make it easier for people to write their personal statements in a proper structure, but because these questions tend to be more helpful than the previous personal statement, the competition is also higher. Because now your competition eliminates people who don't know how to write a personal statement. Now it becomes very beneficial for the people who didn't know how to write a personal statement or didn't receive too much help from their school either, which now makes it all the more important for you to have a great personal statement. So your personal statement has a limit of 4,000 characters, which is approximately 650 words, but for each question there's a minimum space of 350 characters. This means that it is technically up to you about how much you want to write in each section. For example, you can write 350 characters in section 1, 350 in section 2, and then 3,300 in section 3. But of course, that wouldn't be the best statement, so I recommend that you keep at least roughly a similar amount of characters. You might find that you have more to write about in one of those sections compared to the other two, and that's completely okay. You can choose to write a bit more in one section compared to the other two. Now, the purpose of your personal statement is to show why you deserve a place compared to someone else. And by that, I mean there are essentially two things that admission officers are looking for in your personal statement. One is the reason why you want to study this subject and not something else. And two is to show that you have a high standard set of skills that will allow you to complete this degree. It's not just about how they can contribute to your life, but also how you can contribute to the university. The first thing you have to know is to avoid repeating things that are already in your UCAS application. You don't want to introduce yourself with your name, your center of education, the subjects you did, the grades you were predicted or achieved, or even the content of the subjects. All of this is completely unnecessary because they don't want to be seeing things repeated, and it will just be a waste of your character space. Now, the new personal statement has 3 key questions. Now, the first question is, why do you want to study this course or subject? From the UCAS website, this will include your motivation. This could be maybe a role model, a life experience, or simply just your love for the subject. In this section, you may also talk about your future career goals or the next steps after the degree. Something that I was told, and I think is highly important to remember, is to make sure that the focus is on your interest for the subject and not your interest for the career. Because at the end of the day, the people reading your personal statement are academics, and they want to hear about your love for the subject and not for the career after. If there is a particular path from your degree to the career you want to get into that you already have in mind, for example, if you want to become an investment banker, you don't want to be talking about becoming an investment banker in your personal statement, but rather your interest for maths or economics or whatever degree you might be doing. Some more examples that you can include in this section for the reason why you want to study this subject can be personal life experiences. This can be being a carer, the environment you grew up or lived in, an inspirational friend, colleague, or family member, a book you read, a news article or blog, a YouTube video, a lecture that you went to, a podcast that you listened to, a show that you saw, a subject taster that you attended, a research project that you took up. Whatever really ignited your passion for the subject. And if you're not passionate about it, which I think is quite sad, but just make sure it sounds like you are passionate about it, because every university just wants people who are actually passionate about their subject. Question 2 is, how have your qualifications or subject help you prepare? Now, it might be really beneficial to understand the subject area and the qualities you might need to succeed in this area. This section is mainly dedicated to supercurriculars that are academically related. They want you to highlight the transferable skills you have gained from qualifications that are outside of the subjects that you were studying, but also related to them. For example, if you've done an Olympiad, if you've been tutoring or mentoring a subject, if you've done online courses that led to qualifications. For example, MOOCs, which stand for Massive Online Open Courses. Maybe you've done an EPQ in that subject or participated in a competition related to that subject. For example, if you've participated in a hackathon and you're applying for computer science, any ambassador roles that you might have done, any subject leadership roles, any performances. I remember I was actually a maths subject fellow and I was attending open days for the sixth form and talking about the A-level course and how our school teaches it. However, it didn't actually make it into my personal statement because it didn't make the cut and beat the other experiences that I have for the subject I applied for. Again, do not list your A-level or IB or whatever course you might be doing grades because they will already see your predicted grades. Don't talk about the contents of your subject either because out of the people that are applying, there will be so many who have done the exact same course as you. And if you're talking about things that so many people already know, then you're not really bringing anything different to the table. Finally, question 3 is what else have you done to prepare outside of education? Now, this can include work experience, volunteering, jobs, or personal experiences. Other things you might include are exhibitions, museums, online courses, TED Talks, summer schools, young enterprise, CPD, shadowing, tutoring, Duke of Edinburgh, visiting a court if you're planning to study law, and other enrichment activities. Now, if you're at this point of the video and you're thinking, well, there are so many things that you can include in section 2 and section 3, you're right, a lot of it is actually up to you. There is a slight overlap between the sections, which is why they don't have a certain limit on each section and allow you to write as much as you want in one section and as less as you want in another, as long as it's at least 350 characters. Now, the third section will include a combination of supercurriculars like work experience, shadowing, visiting courts, and also extracurriculars that aren't exactly related directly to your subject. When it comes to your supercurriculars, focus on what you learn and how it relates to the subject. Something I think that really helped me when writing my personal statement was reiterating this one question every single time I wrote something. Am I explaining what the course teaches, for example, or what the work experience job entails? Or am I explaining what I learned from the work experience or from the course? You want the personal statement to be a reflection of what you learned and not what they're teaching. With extracurriculars, this section is recommended to be really tiny because it isn't actually that relevant. This can be sports, music, other leadership roles. And definitely don't write too much about this. If anything, you can have like 2 lines maximum. The first sentence can be explaining what these extracurriculars are, and the second sentence can explain the transferable skills that you might have gained. For example, perseverance, leadership, or discipline. And if you are no longer in full-time education and have been on a gap year, for example, you can use section 3 to talk about your experiences since leaving. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about how to structure your personal statement and some writing tips that might be helpful. Right before you start writing, I think the best thing you could possibly do is just read and analyze other personal statements on the internet. Don't just go blind and think every single one is really good. Compare good personal statements to bad personal statements and you'll get a good idea of what it should sound like before you start. The next thing I would recommend is to just make a brain dump long list of all the supercurriculars and extracurriculars and academic qualifications that you have had since year 9 before you draft your personal statement. When you are starting your personal statement, don't use a cliche hook. Do not start with a quote by someone else because universities really don't like listening to things that other people have said. This is your personal statement. They want to hear what you think. Don't start by defining the subject. They will already know what the subject is and you're really not adding any value there. Don't make it too complicated. Don't use too many metaphors. Don't make it sound like a bit of a waffle. Don't start with, I've been interested in this subject since a young age, or I've always known I wanted to study law. Even if it is true, it's just cliche and overused, so don't try and use that. Unfortunately, if you are doing this subject because your parents want you to do it, please do not say that. If you are studying the subject to get rich, don't say that either. You can start with a question, or my personal favorite is talking about a specific topic in the subject that you're interested in studying. For example, in my essay, I started with being interested in how trauma affects behavior. When you are starting your personal statement, think about how you will also end it because you want the essay to sound like an actual flow of events. The best essays tend to have a consistent theme that starts in the beginning and then is also introduced again in the end. Whenever you're talking about something you've done that might be a supercurricular or an extracurricular, which will likely take up lesser space, always link back to the subject. Talk about what you learned, skills you gained, and how that's relevant to the subject that you want to study. When you are referencing books or activities, focus on what you learned and don't just describe them. For example, if you are talking about a book, don't just describe what the book is about, because they probably already know if it's related to that subject, but talk about what you learned from that book. And then the best thing to do is also talk about how you used what you learned and applied it into real life or applied it into another activity, and that way you can build a flow. We have already briefly spoken about how you want to keep extracurriculars to the minimum, and a general recommended ratio is 70 and 30. However, some universities will have a higher ratio or a lower ratio, so definitely check out the university websites before you start writing your personal statement. If you don't actually have any work experience or real industry experience, that's okay. So many top students have got into top universities even without work experience. If you don't have work experience, there are so many other things that you can do, like look up courses or read books. And if you are planning to read books, you can definitely ask your teachers for recommended further reading. Lastly, if you are applying for a dual degree or a triple degree or something like that, definitely make sure that you're giving equal weightage to each of these subjects. Most likely, the maximum amount of subjects in a degree will be 3. However, there are some exceptions that will have more than that, but definitely check out their website pages to see what they're looking for in the personal statements. Last section is drafting and editing. Now, do not expect the first draft that you have written to be the final thing that you send off. You will probably write so many drafts before you actually send off your personal statement. My final personal statement was quite literally my 14th draft. So the sooner you start writing, the better, and don't focus on perfection right from the start. When you are writing, you will realize you will have so much more to say than the word count. So be concise and say more in less words. And most of your time editing and tightening your statement. And do not exaggerate. Authenticity definitely beats waffle, and if you do have filler words, you will end up cutting them out just to fit in more content. Now, if you are struggling to condense your essay, you can use AI in certain sentences to reduce the amount of characters used, but definitely don't just ask it to write your whole personal statement. You will be plagiarized, they won't like it, you probably won't get in. So you can use AI to rephrase sentences, but the content must come from you. Don't hesitate to ask people for feedback. I had asked so many people before I actually sent mine in. My personal tutors were also actually English teachers, so I did actually use a lot of their help as well. But there were times when I received conflicting information, like my teacher would tell me to cut out something, but then someone else told me that that's what they liked about my essay. So in those situations, I had to be my own judge and trust my instincts and decide whether or not to keep that information or take it out. Another thing you can do is, if you have certain things that you want to talk about in your statement but don't have enough space for, you can ask your referee to include it in your reference. I actually did this, and my teacher was kind enough to add something into my reference that I wasn't able to fit into my personal statement. I'm pretty sure one of those things was the math subject fellow that I spoke about earlier. So make sure that everything that you're writing in your personal statement is ranked in order of priority and you're not missing out any important things. However, if there are some things that you would still like to include, you can ask your teacher to include it in your reference. Alright, that's everything you need to know to write a standout personal statement from 2026 and beyond. Remember, it's not about having the most dramatic experiences or fanciest achievements. What matters is you being able to show your genuine passion for this subject, back it up with evidence, and keeping it authentic. If you made it till the end, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you have any questions, drop them in the comments below and I will do my best to answer them. If you are new to my channel, I would highly appreciate it if you would also consider subscribing, because it would help me out so much. Well, good luck with your application. You've got this. If you have subscribed, I will see you next week. Bye!